Welcome back, listeners. Mr. England, please tell us what happened after you were removed from the University of Basel in relation to your co-workers and projects.
The pale criminal analogy that I mentioned extended to other parts of the university. From this point onward, the story becomes darker. I think the word hysteria would not be inappropriate. I had been working under a university contract for editing for a professor of pharmaceutical technology. When the accusation of sexual harassment was made, he informed me that I was immediately terminated from my editing position and that he might not even be able to pay for work already done. When I asked why, he said the rectorate was applying pressure on pharmaceutical sciences. They were to stop their relationship with me. The personnel department later sent me a letter stating that my signed contract with the professor had been in error. They were returning money to me that they said had been incorrectly deducted for months based on a contract that was not meant to be an employment contract. They now claimed, retroactively, that I was intended to be a freelance worker all along. They were trying to change the nature of a signed employment contract to avoid admitting that I had worked for the university. It seems that the university continually looked toward expediency rather than propriety. What would be the point of making a contract if it can be changed unilaterally and retroactively? More hysteria followed. After I was asked to leave the university, Professor M warned co-workers and students that they should no longer communicate with me. These were friends and people I had known for 3 years. This professor was instilling fear to deliberately isolate me from my friends. The question needs to be asked, if things had been done properly, what need was there to stop communications? What did that professor fear about the exchange of information? This creation of fear in his group and the warnings are deeply troubling. The university also terminated my email address without forwarding or without notice. More remarkably, significant scientific collaborations were immediately terminated. I will provide the Swiss National Science Foundation with information on possible financial wrongdoing in the chemistry department and other issues that may form the background for the extreme reaction by that professor.
And were your editing services instantly no longer necessary? What explanation was given for that?
None that I am aware of. That question needs to be directed to my supervisor, Professor M, however. In fact, I was close to finishing a review article as a co-author. I was never informed about the status of the project. That is not professional behavior.
On what basis were students and co-workers asked not to communicate with you? Had some of these people already been scared off by the accusation alone?
The professor in the chemistry department did not make that clear. Some people were told for legal reasons, others received no explanation, but people became immediately frightened. Shunning and enforced isolation is a psychologically brutal tactic. It can lead to serious problems in the workplace and for society. It is a crude tactic not worthy of a university. However, it also demonstrates that certain people in the chemistry department were worried and may have things to hide.
Did the students and co-workers actually stop communicating?
Yes, most did. I received emails stating that my situation was politically motivated and others telling me that they had been warned to stop communicating with me. But then it got worse. 2 students, both personal friends with whom I had had considerable communications, were threatened with expulsion from the university if they continued to communicate with me. One of those students was the same student who had met with the NZZ journalist.
Who issued that threat?
Professor M in the chemistry department, my supervisor. Such conduct has no place at an academic institution and opposes everything that a scientist should stand for. On the internet, one of the world's leading universities, the University of Cambridge, proclaims its core value to be freedom of thought and expression. I may not be justified in comparing Cambridge to the University of Basel, but scientific discovery and creativity do not flourish in an environment of fear and intimidation. That professor created confusion and fear. People were given false signals. They lost valuable support for their publications. The granting agencies and those concerned with the practice of good science in Switzerland should examine what happened there. That professor bears responsibility for the needless destruction of demonstrably positive relationships that benefited students, other professors, and science. Students and my fellow workers concluded, quote, "He must have done something very serious. Otherwise, they would never take such extreme action," unquote. I lost many friends, my reputation, and the opportunity to work as a result of threats by that professor.
Did you react to these threats issued to people you knew?
Yes, I immediately objected in writing to the professor, and I informed my lawyer. Professor M never responded.
You said that scientific collaborations were ended abruptly. Did that influence other projects, aside from the Science Slam, the Weltenreise, your editing work, or the Woman in Science project?
A promising project that I organized in collaboration with the University of California, San Francisco, was dropped. UC San Francisco had agreed to a material transfer agreement with our chemistry department and a scientific collaboration in an effort to produce a membrane for a new, lightweight, portable kidney dialysis unit that they were developing. The project had didactic, scientific, medical, humanitarian, and financial potential. Moreover, it had been approved by my supervisor. Weeks after I was removed, I was shocked to receive a personal email from the professor at UC in charge of the project, asking why they had received no response to the material transfer agreement and further work. Such a failure to communicate with colleagues amounts to scientific malpractice, a venture that could have greatly benefited the University of Basel was a casualty of a false accusation of sexual harassment and the accompanying hysteria for reasons someone should explain.
Are there other examples of termination of communications?
There is a similar story for a collaboration with the Swiss company Actelion. In all of these cases, you can imagine what my colleagues thought and the damage done to my reputation when they were instructed not to communicate with me.
Do you have an explanation for how these internal problems came to impact the scientific work at the university, even involving other institutions?
My explanation is hysteria. From the day the Interpol poster circulated, irrationality took over at the University of Basel. There was a fixed idea which was not altered by the repeated presentation of facts stating the opposite. It was as if the idea, planted by U.S. lawyers, had such emotional momentum that nothing could stop it from growing into what appears like a classic witch hunt. What I think people will find most fascinating and disturbing is how, for 1.5 years, ostensibly good people and ostensibly intelligent people circumvented excellent rules and laws put in place to prevent just such a disaster, and how they, like lemmings to the cliff, ignored the rules to produce the story you are now hearing.
And what have the consequences been of the decisions that have been made at the university? Have your views on mobbing been influenced by this personal experience with the subject?
One aspect of mobbing is to be abandoned by management, which encourages disrespect from fellow employees, accompanied by isolation. This pattern manifests in my case. The consequences of the false accusation of sexual harassment, however, is a career ender for me. Employment is now impossible. The university forces me into a zero-sum game between me and them. I cannot afford to let them write an incorrect history. I must reestablish my good credentials by telling this story. If I ever want to work again, I have no choice but to expose this wrongdoing. One positive result of this experience may be our new website for people who have been or are being mobbed. The way to fight bullies is to expose them. I hope my experience can provide a positive outlet for other stories of injustice.
We will let your statement settle in on our audience as we take a short break. In part 6 of this podcast, we will present the conclusion to Mr. England's story.